It all began on the saddest day of a stranger's life, when one simple act of kindness changed two destinies forever. The rain poured over a quiet cemetery outside Asheville, North Carolina, as mourners silently gathered around a freshly dug grave. While everyone else hurried toward their cars after the service ended, one exhausted single father noticed a young pregnant woman standing alone beside the grave, trembling from grief and barely able to remain on her feet. Within a few hours, that ordinary father would receive a phone call that would turn his impossible life upside down forever, revealing that he had unexpectedly inherited $500 million. Yet the greatest miracle had nothing to do with money. It was the kindness he chose before he ever knew his fortune that changed everything. Before we continue, if you believe that kindness always finds its way back, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment about where you're watching from, share this story with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to the channel for more inspiring true-style stories. Your support helps these stories reach more hearts. Michael Carter was 38 years old and lived in Asheville, North Carolina, with his 8-year-old daughter, Grace. 3 years earlier, his wife had lost her battle with cancer, leaving Michael to raise Grace alone while working long hours as a maintenance supervisor at a local apartment complex. Every paycheck disappeared almost as quickly as it arrived. Rent, groceries, school supplies, doctor visits, and endless bills left almost nothing behind. Some evenings Michael skipped dinner so Grace could enjoy a full meal without ever realizing her father had quietly sacrificed his own. Despite his struggles, Michael had built his life around one simple principle his late wife had always repeated. People never remember how wealthy someone was. They remember how they made others feel. Those words stayed with him every morning as he packed Grace's lunch before sunrise, and every evening as they shared simple dinners filled with laughter instead of complaints. One rainy Friday afternoon, Michael attended the funeral of an elderly tenant named Margaret Sullivan. Most people knew Margaret as the quiet widow who lived alone in Building C. Michael knew something different. He knew she always baked cookies for neighborhood children during Christmas, donated blankets to homeless shelters, and secretly paid utility bills for struggling neighbors whenever she could. The funeral was small. Many relatives lived far away, and only a handful of neighbors attended. After the service ended, people slowly disappeared into the rain. That was when Michael noticed her. A young woman, no older than 27, stood motionless beside Margaret's grave. Her black dress was soaked by the rain. One hand rested protectively over her pregnant belly, while tears streamed down her face. Her breathing became uneven, and her knees suddenly buckled beneath her. Without hesitation, Michael rushed across the muddy grass and caught her before she collapsed. Her name was Sarah Collins. Sarah explained that Margaret had been her foster grandmother after years spent moving through the foster care system. Margaret had been the only consistent family she had ever known. Now she was gone, and Sarah had nowhere to go. Her apartment lease had ended the previous week. The baby's father had abandoned her months earlier, and she had spent her last savings paying funeral expenses because Margaret deserved a proper farewell. Michael looked into her exhausted eyes and saw something painfully familiar. He recognized the same loneliness he had felt standing beside his own wife's grave years before. Instead of walking away like everyone else had, Michael drove Sarah to a nearby diner. He bought her a warm meal even though he knew it meant stretching his grocery budget until next payday. Grace happily shared her dessert with Sarah, making the young woman smile for the first time that entire day. Before leaving, Michael contacted a church friend who helped arrange temporary housing at a local family shelter specializing in helping expectant mothers. He also quietly slipped $100 into Sarah's purse while she wasn't looking. It was nearly all the extra money he had. Driving home that evening, Michael wondered if he had made a foolish financial decision. Then Grace gently squeezed his hand and told him her mother would have been proud. Those words alone made every sacrifice worthwhile. The following morning, Michael arrived at work expecting another ordinary day repairing broken plumbing and fixing leaking roofs. Instead, his phone rang. The caller identified himself as attorney Jonathan Pierce from Charlotte. At first Michael assumed it was a scam, but the attorney calmly explained that Margaret Sullivan had passed away leaving behind a confidential estate plan that had remained hidden for decades. Margaret had once inherited substantial investments from a wealthy brother who had built an enormously successful technology company in California. She had quietly allowed those investments to grow for more than 30 years without telling anyone except her attorney. Because her distant relatives had repeatedly ignored her throughout her life while Michael had cared for her with genuine compassion, she had legally named him as the primary beneficiary several years earlier. The current value of the estate exceeded $500 million. Michael nearly dropped his phone. He laughed nervously. Then he cried. Then he sat silently inside his old pickup truck for nearly 20 minutes, unable to understand how such a thing could possibly happen. News spread quickly across town. People who had barely acknowledged Michael suddenly remembered his name. Old acquaintances called with investment ideas. Strangers requested donations. Long-lost relatives introduced themselves. Everyone seemed interested in the man who had once struggled to buy groceries. Yet nothing about Michael's heart changed. His first purchase was not a mansion. It was paying off every debt that had haunted his family for years. His second was creating college funds for Grace and several children living in the apartment complex where he worked. His third was returning to the shelter where Sarah had been staying. Sarah had safely delivered a healthy baby boy named Noah only weeks after the funeral. She was searching desperately for affordable childcare while trying to rebuild her life. Michael quietly purchased a comfortable home through a charitable foundation and arranged for Sarah and baby Noah to live there without paying rent until she became financially stable. He also funded scholarships for young adults leaving foster care because he had learned how often they entered adulthood completely alone. Instead of building walls around his fortune, Michael opened doors for others. Within 2 years, the Michael Carter Hope Foundation had transformed abandoned buildings into family housing centers across North Carolina. Thousands of struggling single parents received childcare assistance, job training, emergency housing, and counseling services. Grace often volunteered beside her father, reminding everyone that true generosity began long before the money ever arrived. Reporters frequently asked Michael how it felt to become one of the wealthiest people in America overnight. His answer never changed. He explained that the greatest gift had arrived before the inheritance. It happened the moment he chose compassion in a cemetery without expecting anything in return. The money simply gave him more opportunities to continue doing what he had already decided was important. Sarah eventually became director of one of the foundation's largest family support centers. Every new mother who entered the building heard the same story about the stranger who refused to leave someone alone in the rain. Years later, Grace stood beside another graduation stage, watching dozens of former foster children receive college diplomas funded by the foundation. Among them stood Noah, now a confident young man pursuing medicine so he could someday care for vulnerable families, just as others had cared for his mother. Michael quietly watched from the audience with tears filling his eyes. He finally understood Margaret's greatest lesson. Real wealth was never measured by bank accounts. It was measured by lives forever changed because someone chose kindness when nobody was watching. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video, share it with your family and friends, subscribe to the channel, and let us know which moment inspired you the most. Your support allows more uplifting stories like this to reach people who need hope. Special request. Before you leave, please comment with "Kindness always comes back" if you believe one small act of compassion can change someone's life forever. Sometimes life changes because of an unexpected fortune. But far more often, miracles begin with an ordinary person making an extraordinary choice. On a rainy afternoon in a quiet cemetery in the United States, one struggling single father chose compassion over convenience, generosity over hesitation, and love over indifference. Hours later, he inherited $500 million. But the greatest inheritance was the legacy of kindness that continued to echo through countless lives for generations to come.